Hello and welcome. I am Ben the Best 5 and I am coming at you with yet another Kerbal Space Program video. And as you can see here, we have what is my C-Class launcher built with the 1.8 meter parts, and we have a cargo of 2 crew members on board. That's because in this mission, like I alluded to at the end of the last mission, we will in fact be heading to Duna with some crew to head to an orbit of Duna. Now you might notice that this version of the vehicle only has a single engine, whereas the previous version from several months ago had 2. That is just simply because the thrust-to-weight ratio was too high, and I dropped it down as a result. I'd also like to mention that I have been starting all of my videos off just simply by going with the launch, because I have in previous videos, well, 3 I think, I did do a bit of a build time-lapse, but those were some of like my worst views ever, so as a result I've decided to just do that. So yes, but you know, if you think my videos would be better if I did display that still, then just let me know. Anyway, we've gone for a rather usual launch, although that gravity turn was absolutely terrible, but it was still good enough. And in Kerbal Space Program, our gravity turn itself isn't actually particularly relevant, because the atmosphere and the aerodynamic forces are rather thin and rather inconsequential in the long run. So it means if your gravity turn is rather appalling, it doesn't matter, you can still perform everything you need to do. And also I'm just showing a quick boost recovery here for people who haven't seen my videos before. Basically I just make sure it's going on a suborbital flight, and I switch to it, put my payload in orbit, switch to it before it crashes down like that, and then from then I can just ease down on parachutes, and then and that's how you perform a boost recovery in stock Kerbal Space Program, which I think is pretty cool. It's kind of my own unique way of doing it, and my addition into the Kerbal Space Program community. So that's why I do feature a lot of them on my channel, although I do sometimes use a disposable launcher, because using solid rocket boosters only is a bit more efficient for payloads of around 15 tons. Just is, but for anything lower or heavier than that, then you're actually much better off using a reusable booster. Anyway, here I am creating a maneuver node to get ourselves towards Duna. This is fairly straightforward. I was at a transfer window, which meant that I was able to basically just pull out my prograde burn till we end up intersecting its orbit, and from there, with just a few minor tweaks which you will see on screen, I was able to pull ourselves nicely into a Duna encounter. And from here I can just mess around with the various markers until I end up with a nice and close Duna encounter. Now I will in fact be attempting to get an encounter which intersects Duna's atmosphere, just because to save quite a substantial amount of fuel I'm going to use Duna's rather thick and very forgiving atmosphere to slow us down. And for this I'm going to just briefly mention a technique which I find quite useful, so if you're watching this you might want to use this yourself for planning maneuver nodes far into the future. As you can see, Ike is, well, it's rather a large object compared to Duna, which means that if you're going to Duna, you will probably at some point get an encounter with it, which may not be helpful. And the thing about Kerbal Space Program is, if it intersects something and it's like a transfer from a transfer to a transfer, it will actually show you where you're going to go. However, if you create a maneuver node from that, directly on that, and don't touch it, it will still show you where you're going to go. So because of this, as you can see here, I created a maneuver node just before I hit Ike's sphere of influence, which means that I was able to just set up, and it would show me my path. I am performing a small orbital adjustment on the edge of its sphere of influence, mostly because performing a burn this far out, it can be a little bit inaccurate, so a mid-course correction or a correction not that far out from the sphere of influence of the body you are going to is definitely recommended. So I figured since I would end up in Ike's sphere of influence, I might as well perform the burn just before I hit it, which meant that it would give me the largest capacity there to then alter my burn and get myself to the correct height for Duna, which I was expecting, which is, yes, definitely a good idea. I did have to experiment with my height, which I would use to be far enough into Duna's atmosphere that I would end up circularizing, but not so far into the atmosphere that I would either burn up or start to take some damage from the process. And as you can see, I actually got quite close, but then it wasn't quite perfect, so I ended up just following my markers around and burning until I got rather close. And I in fact got so incredibly close there, and that's the maneuver I went with, that I didn't actually need to perform my second maneuver because it wasn't exactly perfectly what I was expecting, but oh well. So yes, I did try and go down engine first because engines do have a larger heat tolerance than anything else. However, the capsule, as you can see, was a lot heavier than the engine and the fuel tank down the end, so it wanted to flip towards that end. The good thing about Ike's atmosphere is it is very, very thin and rather forgiving, which means that I could perform this rather aggressive low altitude aero brake, putting us in Ike's, or near to an orbit, very easily. And now you can see here, doing an aero brake in fact lowered our periapsis to 2 kilometers, which actually over the pole where we were headed would have actually put us into the surface of Ike, because the poles of Ike in fact extend 200 meters above the lowest point, or above sea level on Duna, which would have resulted in a rather fiery crash death. So to solve this, I've just performed a quick burn at apoapsis to raise our apoapsis. And as you can see, our science payload was in fact stored in the service bay, which had deployable explosive doors, and it was hidden there, and I had to wait until I had gone through Duna's atmosphere to deploy them and do our science. So now that we've done that, we're now in space above science, space above Duna, so that we can get our all-important science, and I will, yes, collect that, and this time I finally organized it so that our Kerbals could collect all of the data from the ladder on the pod, and they wouldn't have to perform an EVA to collect it all. So we've got all of our science data, and we can make our way back to Kerbin. Now what I tried to do was I tried to wait for a transfer window back from Duna to Kerbin. However, as you can see, I'm also in a very eccentric polar orbit, which made it very, very difficult, because basically to make it back to Kerbin nice and comfortably, I needed to perform my burn at periapsis. However, it was going to be a long wait until I was at a transfer window, and my periapsis, when I burned it, would result in a lowered orbit in the correct direction to head towards Kerbin. So instead what I did was I waited until the next opportunity I had to bring my orbit close to Kerbin's by burning from periapsis. So that's what I did, and as you can see, that would then put me in a solar orbit which would intersect Kerbin. So I would do that second after I had or ejected myself from Duna. And the reason I'm doing it in this order is simply because, well, there's no other way I can do it. I can't wait for a transfer window and then wait for the thing to be in the right spot. It just has to be done this way. So as a result, that's what I am doing. I also do find that that is a rather useful trick to get from one body to another, even if you're not even if you're not like in a even if you're in like an ideal orbit to transfer from a nice and equatorial orbit in low orbit, even still just burning out and putting yourself into solar orbit and then performing a correction from there is generally a good idea, especially if you don't exactly know when, or your online calculator to tell you when your transfer window will appear is a little bit off. Now, as you can see here, I went all the way back to 0, just simply because my orbit that I got ejected from Duna with and my planned Duna ejection orbit weren't quite the same, so I decided to see if there are perhaps any sooner transfer windows, sorry, not transfer, transfer, I guess you could say windows, transfer points for maneuver nodes which I could use to potentially bring myself back to Kerbin a little bit faster, because I don't like waiting several minutes to perform a burn. Even on time warp, it still takes upwards of 10 minutes, but unfortunately I couldn't do that. However, I did find I was able to still pull myself in and get a Kerbin collision, which is, well, definitely good enough to bring ourselves back to Kerbin. And as you can see, I performed a very, very small burn, which brought us back to Kerbin. And as you can see now, I've time warped back into our Kerbin descent. Notice, just going to say this again, how I detached my service module, etc., from my command pod pointing either normal or anti-normal. Just make sure it doesn't fly up and hit us, which is all good. And as you can see, we are losing almost no ablator from coming back, even though we're hitting the atmosphere rather heavily, just simply because the heat shields in this game are rather powerful. And if you've seen my EVE one, I lost almost all of my ablator in that mission, and I guess I just wanted to put in that to keep that open to see just how much more drastic EVE's atmosphere is compared to Kerbin's. And the answer is, well, Kerbin's atmosphere obviously absorbs or requires less ablator to move through. Therefore, yeah, I don't know, just a little interesting experiment I did in my own head, which I figured I might as well let you guys, my audience, in on. Anyway, our pod of 2 is back on the ground with our Kerbal safely home. The reason I did bring 2 Kerbals instead of 1 is because my launcher, which is capable of launching to 1 Kerbal, simply wouldn't be powerful enough to send us on a Duna transfer. And yeah, this is still nice and efficient. You recover about 8, like, I'm pretty sure for this one was 65% of my funds by recovering the booster, which meant it didn't cost lots overall. Anyway, this is a really efficient mission. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe. Apparently I need to tell you guys to press the notification bell, so do that too. Click one of the links on screen. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Yeah, thank you.